from the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. You know, the Twilight Zone episodes where the main protagonist is all alone, as in everyone else is like frozen, or they've gone mad in some way, or they've gone missing, or nobody knows him anymore. It's like the whole world has gone mad, and everyone else seems to be either dead or missing or crazy, or you just feel all alone. That's where I am these days. And I'll bring you along with me. It's you and me. It's you and me against the world. Everything else has just gone insane. And I don't understand. It's as though you and I are the proverbial Martians who have come down to Earth, and nobody can explain what's going on. It's you and me against the world. Hey, a couple quick corrections before I begin. I've been meaning to do this for a couple of weeks. I noticed in a couple of prior episodes when we were talking about Section 230 of Title 47, that's in the U.S. Code of regarding the Communications Decency Act of 1996. This is when we're talking about the testimony of the various tech CEOs in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Section 230 puts into law the fact that these tech companies are immune from prosecution. They can't be sued for bad things that happen on their platforms. They're just carriers. All right. Well, I refer to it as 320. So I just want to let you know that I made that mistake. I'm sure you noticed it as I said it, and you got a little chuckle. You know, we make mistakes. Joe Biden and I make mistakes. So yeah, I said 320. I think I said it a couple times. It's 230, Section 230. So I just want to let you know that I know. And then the other correction, it was after the Iowa caucuses. I remember looking at my notes, it said like 2.2 million voters in Iowa. And instead of saying a couple of million voters, I said a couple of 100 million voters. So there again, I'm sure you noticed it right as I said it. I know that there are not a couple of 100 million voters in Iowa. I misspoke. So a couple of corrections that I caught. I'm sure there are 100 more corrections. Why don't you let me know? Oh, and one more quick little note before we get into things here. Charles Purcell Presents is back. It's the weekly half-hour podcast of radio theater sketches, some of it improvised, some of it scripted, lots of characters, although I can't do lots of characters, but I do a couple I generically call Bob and Ray. You remember the great old comedy duo of Bob and Ray. It's just two guys talking. One of them has kind of a high voice and one of them has kind of a low voice, so you can tell the difference. But anyway, yeah, Charles Purcell Presents. It's radio theater sketch. I don't want to say comedy. It's comedy adjacent. It's a little weird. It's absurd. Sometimes it's funny. I talk about a lot of the same things I talk about on this program, but I put it into the form of radio theater. And then sometimes there's some soundscapes, and I'll play with sound effects and things. Anyway, it's just a little fun half hour that I do. And it's going to drop on, or it has, actually the first couple have been out. I'm remiss in making this announcement. So they're showing up in your feed if you're already a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, you want to just go ahead and follow me. The Log, this program, and Charles Purcell Presents, the other program, will come in the same feed. They're all under the same umbrella. So as you know, this show drops Wednesdays at midnight, ready for Thursday, and then Charles Purcell Presents drops, let's say, Sundays at noon. It'll definitely be there before it airs on our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio. It airs at 7 p.m. Central Time on over-the-air radio. So there you go. Charles Purcell Presents is back, baby. We've been off for a while, over a year. Okay, so there's that. What do we need to talk about today? A couple of things. Okay, so we watched the Super Bowl. Don't have to talk too much about that. Everybody's had their say. I did have a question, though. I wonder if Taylor and Travis were MAGA, how you'd feel about them then. Would your opinion change about them? I'm just wondering how much that matters to you. And I'm talking now to everybody from all points of the spectrum. Would it change how you feel about Taylor and Travis? Would it change how you feel about them if they were MAGA? If they were anti-vax and anti-immigrant and, if they were outspoken MAGA red hat people? How would that change? Would you still love her music? Would you still love his football? Would you still, on the other side, would you still hate her and the fact that she's taken over the NFL? And yeah, that whole thing. I mean, we did a whole show last week, so I'm not going to get back into it. The phenomenon of the two of them is just so bizarre and weird for the culture. And if you didn't hear last week's show, I basically said they're the signs of the apocalypse, culturally speaking. Or what if they were black? Would they still have the same? Just the fact of these two is so weird that they would have so much impact. Yeah. What if they were MAGA? Or what if they were black? Or what if they were Hispanic? How would that change their fame? How would that change how you feel about them? I'm just thinking out loud. Oh, the one thing I will say, I'll make a comment here. The little temper tantrum that Travis Kelce threw on the sideline where he damn near knocked over his elderly head coach and with veins popping out of his forehead, screaming right into his face, was really, to me, not the slightest bit funny, just very disturbing. Not the first time we've seen anger issues. We've seen Travis Kelce have anger issues on the sideline before. And, don't give me that emotion of the moment and the high stakes of the NFL. Don't give me any of that crap. You're an adult person. You better be able to control your anger. That was over the top for me. There was nothing funny about it. I didn't, people are making funny captions to the picture. No, you can't be having that. Travis Kelce, you need to get some help. You need to see a therapist. Because that just ain't right. And I am damn glad that he's not dating my daughter with that kind of trigger, with that kind of anger. If he's capable of getting right in somebody's face, especially an old guy, if he's capable of doing that, he needs help. And my daughter is about the same age as Taylor Swift, and I'm really glad he's not dating my daughter. Yeah, I didn't like that one little bit. Yeah. I don't, their celebrity just off the charts. I don't know. And the other thing that doesn't make sense is, aren't we supposed to hate the cool kids? I mean, they epitomize the cool kids. The star of the football team and the head cheerleader and, the most popular. Aren't we supposed to hate them? They're the villains of every 80s teenage movie, right? Taylor and Travis are the villains. We're not supposed to like the popular kids. What's happened to this country? Yeah, everything surrounding the Super Bowl just disgusts me. All the money and the gambling and the ads and the military flyover and the toxic masculinity and the drinking and the hyper promotion. My two least favorite weekends. Super Bowl weekend, though, I like to watch the game, but everything surrounding it makes me just sick. And Memorial Day weekend, when so many people use it to fly their flag of jingoism and warmongering. All right. One more thought about Taylor Swift. The one thing I didn't mention last week when we did a whole thing about her. She apparently gives to charities in the cities where she performs. According to reports, I don't know if this is true, but according to reports, after her shows in Santa Clara, California, she made a donation to the local food bank, and they didn't disclose the amount, but Again, according to reports, it was enough to feed 500,000 people a month for an entire year. All right, so my thought on that obviously is, well, good for you, Taylor Swift. That's beautiful. That's great. Now, she is a billionaire, so for you and me, that's like, $5. Or I don't know, do the math. I don't know what the math is. Even if it's $100, it's like, great. But, you probably give $100 to charity. So it's fine. It's great. But she's a billionaire. So let's not go too crazy here. And my main thought on this is, why in the world do we live in a world where 500,000 people per month for an entire year need the help of a local food bank? And that's just one town out of 1,000 towns that, God love Taylor Swift, she can't go up the peninsula, up to San Francisco, and say, well, here, how many people do you have who need help eating? Well, she didn't do that. And of course, I'm not blaming her for not doing that, but of course. So all I'm saying is, if people who just get all gushy about how she gives to charity, that's great. But it doesn't change our fight. We have to continue to fight for a world where none of this is necessary. Which brings me to something I need to sort of, clarify. I use the word capitalism a lot. And I got a nice note from an old friend, and he made me think, because he was kind of quibbling with my language. And he made a really very pretty good point. He said, what you call capitalism, I call commercialism. And he kind of described how he thought about it. And it was all, it was a nice little note. And I had no debate or argument with him about that. It just, okay, yeah, a good note. Maybe I am misusing the word capitalism. Or maybe I'm not. Or maybe I should call it commercialism. Here's my point. I think I need to define what I mean when I use the word. Because any kind of shorthand, especially when you get into the isms, any kind of shorthand can get you into trouble. Because people don't understand exactly what you mean. You have an idea, you have a notion in your head what you mean when you say capitalism, but maybe someone else is hearing it differently. So here's what I want to say. I just want to promise to be better. And I want to thank my friend for the note. It made me think, and you know what? From here going forward, I'm going to make a promise that I'm at least going to try to be better about this. I'm going to really make an effort to not use jargon and try to avoid shorthand terms that can be easily misinterpreted, like capitalism or post-capitalism or social anarchy, which is another one I use a lot. I mean, I'm not a scholar. I'm not an academic by trade. And, neither are you, probably. If I do have any scholars out there, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. But most of us aren't scholars. So let's speak clearly. So, for example, what I mean by post-capitalist or social anarchy is I want to live in a world, I think the world would be better. The thing I'm advocating for is where power, political power, economic power, the actual power that we have is distributed more laterally, like money. And speaking of money, I really think, quite literally, I don't mean this as a metaphor, that money needs to be abolished. And I know that's a tall order. If we can't get there, at the very least, money has to be stripped of its power. It can't be at the center of everything we do. We can't be making decisions based on who makes the money and who gets the money. And we just have to take money out of the equation as best we can. So I'm going to try to speak in just plain terms. Let's just talk about what we believe, basic values, basic tenets, without getting into the jargon. Rights are universal. There's a big debate over equality versus equity. And those on the right, the more conservative folks, they want to say, well, equality of opportunity, and then after that, you're all on your own. And that's where they get into all this, color blindness, and you can't do identity politics and stuff like that. You just, if everybody has the same rights on paper, then it's up to each individual to take advantage of that. And if they lose, they lose. And if they win, they deserve it. We all have the same rules on paper. Sorry. All right, that sounds like a pretty convincing argument. I don't really believe in that. I believe in equity of outcomes. I don't try to hide the fact that I believe in that. I just do. Because everybody's got their own story. Everybody's different. If somebody's too dumb or too stupid or too lazy for whatever reason to be able to get food on the table and not die, well, that person still deserves food. We got to just find a way to feed him. And especially if he can't feed his children, if he's too dumb or too stupid or too lazy or is too strung out on drugs or whatever his problem is, I don't know exactly how he got that way. Regardless of how he got that way, his kids have every bit as much right to eat and to have a great education and to have great health care as any other kid from any other family. If their parents are hardworking, God-fearing, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I do believe in equity of outcomes, not just equality of opportunity. So yeah, let's speak clearly. A real basic tenet of Marx, and there again, Jargon Alert. You can't say the name Marx. You can't use the word Marxism. But he spoke plainly when he said, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Very plainly spoken. Every single person, just by the fact that they're a human being, deserves to have what they need. All of us together collectively are perfectly capable of providing everyone with what they need. And everyone just ought to have it. It's just a basic damn human right. And then from each person, give us what you can. And if you're a smart, strong, hardworking person, chip in. We're not going to threaten you by force of prison or starvation that you have to, but it's expected, and you will. And then the person who's, for whatever reason, they're just born with the wrong chemicals in their brain, or they had some traumatic events and they just can't get up and get to work. They can't negotiate life. They can't get things done. You know what? You got to love them as much as you love anybody else, and they deserve a house and food just like everybody else. So from each, according to their ability, to each, according to their need. It's so simple. But then you slap a name on it. Oh, Marxist, communism. Now all of a sudden you got all these problems. But I'm making a suggestion today. Let's just not do that anymore. You don't have to give it a name. You don't have to be an expert. You don't, and you don't need to be intimidated by people like people like me, people with degrees who use maybe words that not all of us understand. And that's not to say anybody's better than anybody else. When I talk to my mechanic, when I take my car into the mechanic, he's talking a language I don't even understand. I just have to trust the guy, nod my head, say, yeah, okay, all right. And that goes for like 90% of my life. If my banker is talking to me about my finances, or if my doctor about my health, or my mechanic about my car, or my plumber about my stuffed sink, and he's explaining why, he says, okay, just do what you need to do. I have no idea even the words you're saying. It just sounds, it's Charlie Brown's teacher. It's wah, 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 wah. Well, that's what a lot of politics talk is to a lot of people, and that's why they tune out. So you and I aren't going to do that anymore. We're going to use plain language, and we're going to describe our values plainly. Now, that's not to say that you don't study, that you don't think carefully, that you don't try to understand issues. No. I don't want anybody just, with their homespun opinions just shooting from the hip. Oh, God, I know so many people like that. That's one of my big pet peeves. People with just opinions, just because they have them. Well, I have a right to my opinion. They have no freaking idea what they're talking about, but they just launch into opinions. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying think carefully, think clearly, do your due diligence, study the issues, but then once you're there, just use plain language. Speaking of language, there's also the weaponization of language, where people use language purposely to mislead. Or they might say they'll justify just, well, I'm just trying to be persuasive. But it can very easily cross the line, and when you're crossing the line. Let's just be honest. Let's be intellectually honest. So yeah, these terms, capitalism, socialism, anarchism, they do way more harm than good, just the fact that they exist. Because they've been weaponized and used to mislead. Oh my God, socialism. You could talk about the history of Milwaukee, from where I am right now, in my beloved hometown here, and the history of socialism here in this city with socialist mayors who made Milwaukee one of the great leading cities of the country back in the early 20th century. But then you compare that to the right wingers who use socialism as it's the dirtiest word they know. So yeah, the words themselves have become so weaponized that they've become useless. Woke. Oh my God. That's just been completely co-opted, stolen, mischaracterized. Something the right wing calls cultural Marxism. Yeah, let's promise each other right now. Let's take a little vow that when people launch into jargon, we're going to listen very carefully to all the other words around the jargon. We're going to ignore the jargon, listen to what they're really saying. And if they're just BSing you, then you got to be done with them. You have to demand that people speak plainly. And then we'll do it ourselves as well. Well, let's see. We're out of time. A couple quick things I want to comment on the news. The report from Robert Hur, the special prosecutor who looked into Joe Biden's classified documents that they found in his garage. Robert Hur is a total hack and a liar because he used the report to write disparagingly about Joe Biden. And I'm no fan of Joe Biden. When the 2020 primaries were happening, he was at the very bottom of my list. So that's not the point here. But it's just really the height of hackery, what Robert Hur did. All this talk about Joe Biden's memory and lack of focus and all this BS. First of all, you don't write about someone you're not charging with a crime because they're not going to have their day in court to defend themselves. You just don't do it. And not only that, nobody else is reporting this. Everybody else who talks to Joe Biden and has business with him and has meetings with him, Democrats, Republicans, independents, everybody, they all say the same thing. They all say he's fine. Yeah, I see him fumble around like we all do. Our eyes don't lie. But yeah, he's an old guy. Who cares? So anyway, the Robert Hur thing was a disgrace. And then all the back and forth afterwards. So many times, I opened by saying that, I feel like I'm in a Twilight Zone episode where everybody else has gone mad. And I'm just wondering what's going on here. Everybody's reaction to this report, which I'm sure you heard the news by now, right? It exonerated Biden. He wasn't charged with any crime. Everybody was wrong. Everybody was crazy. The right wing used it opportunistically, of course, to claim that Biden is old and unfit and he's lost it. But then Biden just falls all over himself and very hastily calls this news conference where he goes out and just represents himself really poorly, I thought. If you're ever president, don't ever call a press conference when you're angry. You're not going to come off looking good. And the defense of Joe, I mean, he is old and he is doddering, and there's a pretty nice chance he might just drop dead at some point before the end of his second term if he's reelected. That's the chance you take. Politics is a team sport. He's got a whole bunch of people there in the White House and in his cabinet. He's got advisors. It's the whole party. Now, I'm not a Democrat. Of course, you know that. I'm a small d Democrat. I believe in democracy, but I'm not a capital D Democrat. I do not believe in the Democratic Party. I don't believe in the Republican Party. No, they're not the same. One of them is an existential threat that has to be stopped. The other one is just a corporate rubber stamp for anything the elite rich folks want to do. It's a lousy choice, but there we are. So it's one of those cases where a lot of things can be true at the same time, and a lot of things are true. Republicans are shameless liars and opportunists. Robert Hur is a MAGA hack. Joe Biden is a grumpy old man who does get mixed up, but it doesn't really matter because we got, like I said, it's a team sport. He's got a bunch of folks. If he drops dead, okay, we got a vice president. There's a whole system. It's all written right in the damn Constitution. It's not like it's going to be a crisis. It just is what it is. And then you go back to the Republicans, again, because they just lie about everything. They treat Kamala Harris, who they refuse to even pronounce her name correctly because they're racist pigs. They just, it's such a small little thing. But they have to say Kamala. They just have to. They just refuse to pronounce her name correctly. That's how low these people are. That's how petty they are. That's how disgusting they are. Anyway, they paint her as though it would just be the end of the world. We're all going to just go up in flames if she ascended to the presidency. I don't like Kamala Harris either. She was like probably second to last, right behind Joe or right in front of Joe during the last primary process. So it's not like I'm a fan. I'm not protecting these people. I'm not defending these people because I'm a big fan. I don't like either one of them. But they both leave me really cold. I don't really care for either one of them or their politics. So a lot of things can be true at the same time. And that her release of this report, everybody came out bad. David Frum, the pollster, strategist, speechwriter, he says our choice is between sane and psychopathy. Psychopathy. How do you pronounce that? Psychopathy? Psychopathy. Psychopathy. I think it's psychopathy. Anyway, yeah, I agree. The Democrats are sane, but the Republicans are psychopaths. So that's a pretty lousy choice. And we're out of time today. But I think maybe that's where we should pick up next week. Let me make that promise now, depending on what news breaks over the next week. I think it's time that we go back and talk about, again, when I picked up this program a few weeks ago, I promised I wasn't going to get just totally obsessed with the presidential race. But there's no getting around it. I think we have to spend some time talking about the presidential race. So please do look for this in your feed next week. And prior to that, of course, reminder, you're going to hear Charles Purcell Presents. That's going to drop on Sunday, and I'll talk to you here again in this format on Thursday. So, yeah, I think it's time. I think we need to spend a little time talking about presidential politics. Yeah, I think we do. All right. I need to tell you that our flagship terrestrial station is River West Radio in Milwaukee, riverwestradio.com. Thanks to you guys. I want to encourage you to visit the website, charlespurcell.com. Lots of content to be had there, including every single episode of every single podcast that we've ever done. Lots of different titles. If you want to drop me a line, charlespurcell@gmail.com. We can be heard, of course, on all the major podcast platforms. And thanks to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performs our theme music. All right, so there it is. That's the log. I'm Charles Purcell.